All right, good day, everybody. This is Z Marcel too. Welcome to another edition of the Sports Inquirer Show. We're recording on June 9th, 2021. It's been a long time since we did a show, way too long. I may delve into details why it's taken so long, but it's glad to be back here recording our broadcast. As always, actually, on today's show, we're going to go over the NBA playoffs and the backdoor cut. We'll delve into some major activity in the NFL with the start of the mini camps. We've had some developments especially here in Atlanta, Georgia. A future Hall of Famer and all timer for the Falcons has a new home, so we'll delve into that. The original free kick will go into Atlanta United too, as they continue their push to be a postseason team in USL Championship Soccer. We'll also break down the United States win over Mexico for the CONCACAF Nations League Championship. And then in the miscellaneous department, we may delve into us other news and notes in the world of sports and beyond. As always, if you want to follow everything that we're doing, head to the mothership, thesportsinquirer.net. That's a great way to keep track of everything that we have going on. Then you can transition to our social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Sports Inquirer. That's all one word. Make sure that you follow us on those platforms so that whenever we have any new content, you get an immediate updates and see everything that we have going on. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcast, and iTunes under the Sports Inquirer. I actually went to each of these sites over the past few days for some maintenance, and all of them are up to date as far as everything that we have going on. As I said, from YouTube, all our videos, and our Inquirer show, SoundCloud, which is very beneficial for me. I like using SoundCloud personally because, and I know this when I'm in the gym, I like SoundCloud as well because you can actually listen to your content and have your screen off. YouTube does not have that option. Then I like YouTube as well, but you have to have you can have your screen has to be on, and that can cause conflict when you're when you're moving around, working out, doing your thing. You know, that happens. You're going to press buttons and everything like that, and that messes things up. With SoundCloud, you don't have to worry about that. So that's cool. Spotify, we're on there. And if you have a subscription to that platform, make sure you give us a listen. Google Podcasts. I use Google Podcasts for a lot of my shows when I'm listening, especially Jim Cornette's show, who is a professional wrestling legend. His podcast and some other guys. I like listening on the Google Podcast setup because similar deal with being able to have your screen off and on and everything like that. And then iTunes, they're the standard bearer. They're the OGs of the podcast streaming game. I like them as well, and we're on there also. So make sure you go to all of those platforms and check us out. All right, let's transition to the backdoor cut and everything going on in the world of professional basketball as we move through the NBA playoffs. Instead of breaking down each individual game, and we'll get to those during the process of our breakdown, I have some overarching themes that I've noticed through the playoffs so far. And I think these three themes are really big trends to keep track of as we go through this season and possibly into next season. First one, no LeBron James. First time in his NBA career that he has not won a first round playoff series. Now, remember 2 years ago with the Lakers, his first year in Los Angeles, they did not make the playoffs. So that's happened before. But this is the first year that in his career that he was in the playoffs as a in the first round, whether it was with Cleveland, Miami, and now with the Lakers, that he did not advance to the next round. Of course, they were eliminated by Phoenix, and what we saw in that series is, and the Suns will come up in a moment. But we'll stick with the Lakers side of things. LeBron's a great player, and like he can be the Skip Baylesses and the Stephen A. Smiths and Colin Cowherds and those guys and Marcellus Wiley and Emmanuel Acho, and debate his greatness. Is he the greatest of all time? Is he better than Michael Jordan? Is he better than Kobe Bryant or Kareem or Wilt and all that stuff? And Bill Russell, is he in that category? Those arguments are so tough to make as far as who is the greatest of all time. But you have to put him in that category of top five or top 10 all time. You just look at his legacy: 4 championships, the 4 MVPs, multiple Finals MVPs. He's done a lot, done it all. But at this stage of his career, as you look at it, I think he's in year 18 or just finished year 18. He, for a championship team, he cannot be the best player on the team anymore. And that's not a knock on his legacy and all that he's done. He's a say top 5, top 10 all-time player, first ballot Hall of Famer, really a trendsetter. And we're gonna appreciate him just like a lot of guys with like post-retirement. You appreciate them more when they're gone, whether it's through retirement or really unfortunately through Kobe Bryant through an early death with his accident. It take when guys are gone, you really look back and appreciate them even more than they were playing. I think LeBron in this era is highly criticized, maybe the most scrutinized athlete in the history of sports. Just looking at the way the 24/7 news cycle of sports, internet being a factor, everyone you're listening to me right now on a digital platform. Everyone has a voice, everyone has an opinion, and he has been in the middle of that era since the beginning of his career. That wasn't around in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s or the 90s. So you look at maybe who's the most critiqued athlete, you would say Muhammad Ali and all the stuff that he went through on and on out of the boxing ring. That's true, and it was a political side to his stuff, but it wasn't as intensive, I would argue, as it is now. You look at Michael Jordan, maybe the most at his peak, maybe the most him and Tiger Woods and Muhammad Ali, maybe the most famous athletes in the world when they're at their respective athletic peaks. And Tiger and Jordan had a little bit more of the media and Tiger a little bit more, and Jordan to a less degree, even though Jordan his peak was in the 90s. Technology and as far as the attention was not what it is now with the innovations of Twitter and Instagram and even the Facebook and podcasting and it's all and then the full-time commitments of the ESPNs and the Fox Sports Ones and NBC Sports where it's a lot all 24/7, especially with ESPN and Fox Sports, where they literally have 6-7 hours a day devoted to a sports center recap show, the debate shows. All that was not existent in the 70s and 80s and even the 90s. And those guys, I mean, they had their different levels of critiques. But going back to LeBron, him having to go through the most scrutiny of any athlete I think I've ever seen, and his greatness. But the reality is that now he is at an age where if they want to win a championship, he cannot be the best player on the team. Now he's still going to be a major contributor, and he's going to do all that he does. But what really did in the Lakers, I think, was unavailable or inconsistent health of Anthony Davis. At this stage of James' career, Anthony Davis needed to be the guy to be an MVP candidate and be the guy that's in the running with Jokic, who won the MVP. And congrats to him. And we'll get to Denver later on. But Embiid and guys like that we're talking about, even a Chris Paul, who was a big contributor, for the Suns in their run. Anthony Davis just all this year it just was not able to be there consistently, especially at the end of the year. And I knew at the middle of the season when he was dealing with an Achilles injury, that's bad news. And they're saying he strained an Achilles. That's not a good sign. And I think you saw overcompensation with that, dealing with the ankles and then the knee. And then ultimately the groin went for him. And we saw him pull the groin and be ineffective towards the end of the Suns series. And LeBron James did all that he could, but he is not. It's not the LeBron James of the early Cleveland days or even the Miami days where he can take just a ragtag group of players, and that's what Schroeder is, and Morris, and Caruso, and Caldwell Pope. All those guys they're scrappy players. They're not even all-star level caliber players, not even superstar, not even all-star level players. And in the past, James could have probably willed that team to a conference finals or even making a championship appearance in the NBA finals. He's not there anymore. So I think Davis, being dinged up really hurt them. And now what you have is a big vacuum. And because we're so used to seeing LeBron James, even if they don't make the finals, these are conference finals or make the NBA finals. Remember, he's been to 10 NBA finals in his entire career. And that's a lot of basketball of seeing LeBron James. But with his disappearance is the emergence of the young players. And that's point number two, what we've seen throughout the NBA. Trae Young, big moments for him with the Atlanta Hawks, able to win that first round series over the New York Knicks. First player to have three 30-point games on the road in Madison Square Garden, I think in the postseason since Michael Jordan. You see the numbers, pretty much averaging 30 points, 10 rebounds a contest. He was able to help the Hawks advance into the second round. Their series is tied 1-1 with the Philadelphia Sixers. Donovan Mitchell, 45 points last night as the Jazz were able to win their first game of the Western Conference semifinals against the Clippers. Luka Doncic, 35 points per game average in their 7-game series loss to the Clippers. We saw his emergence. Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, two guys who have been inconsistent in their career. Well, definitely Ayton and even Booker. Yes, I know he scored 70 points earlier in his career. He's a very strong scorer, but with the addition of Chris Paul, that team has championship aspirations. All those guys I named are 30 and under. Certainly, I mean, Luka and Trae are not even 25 yet. So you add all that up, you see the emergence of young guys. Even Joel Embiid, he had a big night, 40 points in the win over the Hawks last night, and a game two of that series against Atlanta. So I think the emergence of the young superstars, because LeBron can't play forever. And we'll get to that team in New York that's going to probably win the championship in a moment. So I'm not including those guys. We'll get to them in a second. And even Jokic, who won the regular season MVP, who was awarded last night. He's not even 26 years old. So all these guys in their early to mid 20s are taking over, and it's been good to see those guys. Now I think that America and the rest of the nation, you're going to see the ratings. I think they're not going to be as high as in the past because we're just like a lot of other things. We're creatures of habit. We were used to seeing Jordan every year contend for a championship, and then there was a little bit of a lull when you had the Pistons make a run, and all those Jordan, and then Kobe and Shaq, and those guys were dynamic personalities playing with the Lakers, and you saw that emerge, and that was a strong point. While when they broke up and they had their separation, you had that period where the Spurs won championships and the Pistons and some of those squads. I'm a basketball head, so I mean, Tim Duncan just got in Hall of Fame, probably the best forward in my generation as far as watching sports or watching NBA. But did it translate into a lot of attention? And not so much. The Pistons, when they won their title over the Lakers, very good squad, but was it really appealing to the masses? Not so much. Kobe had his run as a solo. That's not solo. I mean, no disrespect to Paul Gasol and the Lakers, but he kind of carried it a little bit. And then you had a LeBron era, which we're in right now, and that's very LeBron's been great. I mentioned all of his accolades, but he's going to retire in the next 2-3 years. He can't play forever. Who's going to be that next guy to kind of take over that mantle, not only as like the best player in the world, which I think we're starting to see some other players step up to that, but as far as the media attention and the interest in the game. And I think I've named three guys who definitely have a shot of doing that. I think Luka is very close to being there already. Some would argue he should have been an MVP candidate this year, but I think the way he plays and his style is very conducive to being that next face of the NBA. I think Trae Young has a chance to do that as well. Trae is interesting because he's kind of going in that, and Steph Curry, who I've not even mentioned in this conversation because they're out of the playoffs. We've seen the Warriors have a big run over the past few years, and Curry definitely put himself in that category of faces of the NBA. But Trae I think has a chance to do that. Donovan Mitchell, obviously playing in Utah is a little bit different, but I think that he has a chance to do that. Giannis, who and I had the Nets and their whole squad, but yeah, Giannis is not very good situation right now with the Bucks. They're not looking too hot right now, but he's a two-time MVP, and won the previous two before Jokic this year. But I think the league has a very good crop of guys in their early to mid 20s. Zion Williamson, I think if he can get in the postseason, and that's why I mentioned as well. And being here in Atlanta, out here a lot of the Atlanta fans be mad at the national media not paying attention to Trae Young and why doesn't he get the respect he deserves? Why isn't he mentioned among the top 5 or 10 players in the NBA? You make your name in the postseason. And Luka got it. And there's the Trae and Luka argument. I've said from the very beginning, I think even during the draft, I think Luka's the better player. But I think that Trae is going to have a very good career himself. There's no reason both of them can't be multiple time All Stars or both can't be multiple MVP candidate or be in the running for multiple MVPs. They can do it together. And they're in different conferences too, so they kind of have these parallel careers. It's not all or nothing. It's not like one has to be MVP, future Hall of Famer, and the other one is going to be a bust. That's not how it works. Both of them can have their own separate careers and be very beneficial for their own respective teams. So I think those guys, just the way their style of play, makes it very interesting as far as potential faces of the league. But I think that's been the second thing, the emergence of the young superstars. And then the third point from the NBA that we've seen so far in the playoffs is dominance of the Brooklyn Nets. I think outside of, and mentioned our entire conversation, I didn't mention Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, or James Harden, who all, especially Harden and Durant, we've seen them be regular season MVPs. Durant has two NBA Finals MVPs when he was with Golden State. I mean, Durant is just and I think his style is weird because off the field or off the court, especially on social media, he's very aggressive. He just went after Jay Williams, who was supposed to be his buddy, about a day or two ago because he was talking about a conversation that Jay Williams trying to pass along a conversation that he had with Durant about Giannis. And Durant was very boisterous on social media about how that conversation didn't happen and not to trust him. And Jay and him are boys. They've done business together. Literally, they have that boardroom show on ESPN. So they actually are close off business wise off the court. And then Durant went after him. Durant needs to just put the blinders on and not listen to all the noise. And his recovery he tore his Achilles 2 years ago, and he's looked like he may be even better or just as good as when he was with Oklahoma City and Golden State. It's amazing his recovery. And he just had some tremendous big nights. And what that leads to ultimately is the Nets. And they've done this the past two games without James Harden, who has the hamstring injury that he dealt with in the regular season as well. If they get Harden back, it's a wrap. And they'll lose some games. They're not going to sweep every team that they play. And I think even they're going to win one of these two games in Milwaukee. Game 3, obviously, would be the opportune time for them to make that happen. But you're going to see a dominant performance really throughout the rest of the playoffs by Brooklyn. If Harden comes back, it's definitely going to be more. I still think they can win. They can still win the championship without Harden. It'll be a lot tougher. But with Durant and Kyrie Irving on that team, and you combine that with Joe Harris, maybe the best shooter currently left in the playoffs in the NBA. You look at the numbers; he's right up there. Blake Griffin, who's had a career revival with the Nets, he didn't dunk for years. Literally, when he was with the Pistons, all of a sudden he's catching dunks and lobs and put back dunks and everything with the Nets. So he has found his health. They're just a really, really solid team. And I think they're going to not roll through Milwaukee because Milwaukee will win a game. They might even win two, but they're going to win that series. The Hawks and the Sixers, that's a toss up, but I think ultimately I picked the Sixers before the series because I thought that with Embiid, if he was healthy and playing because he has the meniscus tear, and I was listening to local sports media in Atlanta, and they're saying that knee looks really good for a torn meniscus, and that was a small tear and everything like that. But he's still putting up 35 plus points with a hurt knee, and we know his injury history. Is he really injured? I think he's really injured, or hurt, hurt, but he's working through it and playing really well. I did say if Embiid was able to play and be healthy, they would win the series, and I'm still sticking with that. But I think if Embiid gets hurt, and you never know with that knee and his injury history, all it takes is for a bad fall in his back or him to tweak something, and he's out for a few games. Hawks can win that series without question. Still, whoever wins that series is still going to lose to Brooklyn when that comes around. And then the West, I would have said the Clippers would be the biggest threat to Brooklyn in the NBA Finals, but the Clippers got to get past Utah first. And we saw last night 45 points from Donovan Mitchell, big performance from him without Mike Conley. If Conley comes back and Mitchell can work off the ball, I think he'll be even more productive on the offensive end. But they got to get past Utah. And I mean, Denver is a solid team with Jokic, the MVP. He'll provide some trouble in the post against Brooklyn, and even the Suns. Booker, is going to get his points. Paul is a solid distributor. Aiden is an inside player that can cause some trouble. They got some really good shooters and contributors with Bridges and some other guys on the Suns. But I think ultimately this is Brooklyn's championship to lose. And it might be a little anticlimactic if you look at it from that perspective, which I am. But I think that that's going to be very tough. I see a team beating Brooklyn 4 games in a series. Remember, this is not like the NCAA tournament for basketball or even the NFL. Anyone can win 1 game. But to win a series, usually the best team with the best players emerge. And that's what Brooklyn has right now. You can win Boston won a game. Tatum had to score 50 points in that contest. And Tatum should be in that young superstar conversation as well that I was mentioning with all the other guys. So Tatum deserves to be in that category of young guys. But it took Tatum to score 50 points to win that game win one of the games in that series against Brooklyn. So it can happen. But for to beat that team 4 times, that's going to be very tough to see any team doing that. But we'll be keeping track of the NBA playoffs and everything going on with that. All right, let's move on to the Gridiron Blitz and the NFL and things going on there. I do have to start with the news from Atlanta with Julio Jones and him being traded to the Tennessee Titans. In essence, the Falcons got a 2nd-round pick for Julio Jones, and they exchanged some picks from there. Here's what I think happened with this scenario. And there are 3 camps of, if you're an Atlanta Falcons supporter, you can kind of be angry, well, not angry, but exasperated in 3 entities. You can be mad at the team, you can be mad at Julio, or you could just be mad at the general situation. I guess that's two deals. Here's how I look at it. I look at the Falcons and the mistakes that they made with Julio Jones. Signing him to that 3-year extension, or have him having 3 years left on this current contract that he's under, and the salary that he was paid was unnecessary. They were saying that he was going to hold out, he was not going to report, all this other stuff. He was going to report, he was going to go to camp. And the fact that they signed him to this extension was not the right move for them to make. I think that the trade should have been done earlier because I know they got the 2nd-round pick from Tennessee, which is good. But I think that if they were looking ahead, they could have, if they were proactive in their rebuild from even before the draft even started, they could have gotten a 1st-rounder, I believe. Because I think at this stage of the game, after the draft, after all these teams have made their free agency moves and made their draft picks, and you had him, Julio Jones, and I still think Shannon Sharp, who I'm watching right now on Undisputed, did Julio wrong, or maybe not necessarily, with him doing that live call and Julio saying, "Oh, I'm up out of there, and I just want to win," and all this other stuff. And then the stories reporting that Julio wanted to play with a quarterback with a bigger arm that could throw the deep ball, and him trying to link up with Cam Newton in New England. All that stuff really hurt his trade value from the Falcons' perspective because you knew he was going to be out of there. There was no way that under a new regime, remember under the new general manager, Fontenot, and the new head coach, Arthur Smith, there was no way that they were going to bring a disgruntled Julio Jones into training camp. So that really hurt the leverage for the Falcons. And they weren't going to trade him to an NFC team or try not to trade him to an NFC team because those teams really could have used him. You look at the landscape. The Rams could have used him. The Packers could have used him. Those have been teams that could have been very beneficial, but you got to cross paths with him probably at some point. So you send him to the AFC, you send him to Tennessee, and look, he's the and I always said the fan has to realize this happens. This is professional sports, and not everyone gets to end their career with their respective franchise. And you have to learn this. And I learned it at a very early age. I go back to my personal experiences growing up in New York. My three favorite athletes, Lawrence Taylor for the New York Giants and the NFL, and then two New York Mets, Dwight Gooden and Darryl Strawberry. I learned several things from those experiences with those guys. One, I saw greatness. Saw three Hall of Famers in their respective sports. I saw maybe the greatest linebacker of all time, possibly a guy who, in Dwight Gooden, one of the best young prospects ever, and Strawberry, who should have hit 500 home runs in his career. So I look at those three guys on paper, and I saw greatness, and that was awesome. But I also learned that you can't expect those guys to reach their peaks and end their careers with their respective franchises. I also learned not to look at my athletes as heroes because all three of those guys had drug problems off the field. And I'm not speaking out of turn. It is what it is. You've seen the stories and documentaries. So this whole athletes are my hero, they're my role model. I learned at a very early age not to do that because those guys, and it's not that they're human, and I'm not dismissing what they did on the court, but I've never looked at an athlete since then at any level as an inspiration for my life. I have uncles and aunts and pastors and coaches and other people in my life that I look at in that way. And when I was coming up, and even now to some degree, my brothers and all that stuff. But I've never looked at an athlete as like the be all and end all of that's my role model. And I'm saying Julio's not in that camp. But I'm just establishing the base when I look at an athlete. What I also learned in the second half of when I became a teenager is seeing those guys perform on other teams. Lawrence Taylor retired as a Giant, so that wasn't a problem. I saw Darryl Strawberry play for the Dodgers, play for the Giants, go to the New York Yankees and win championships and hit big home runs for them. I saw Dwight Gooden throw a no-hitter for the New York Yankees. I remember watching that game. I was living in New York at the time. I was still a teenager. And the Mets, until Yohan Santana a few years later, never had a no-hitter. And Dwight Gooden, who outside of Tom Seaver was the best Mets pitcher ever, he threw a no-hitter for the Yankees. I had to watch that. I was happy for him because he was overcoming his adversity and he came back and performed. But what I learned is that your favorite athlete is not always going to end his career with your respective team. And bring it modern times and back to the NFL. If Joe Montana can play for the Kansas City Chiefs, if Tom Brady, who you would think would be a shutdown retirement, greatest quarterback of all time, one franchise, the Patriots, and he's going to play there till he is done. If he could play for the Bucks, it can happen. Peyton Manning, similar to, top 5-10 quarterback all time, Peyton Manning, drafted by the Colts, won a championship there. You thought, man, he is going to retire in Indy and play there forever. And sure enough, he went to the Broncos. Now, for Manning and for Brady, they were able to go to new teams and win championships. I don't know if it's going to happen with Julio Jones, but I think the reality is that looking at professional sports, guys get traded, they move on, and you can't expect anyone to finish their career with your franchise. And I think that the Jones deal as well, he's mentioned from his side of things, saying that he was gone and that didn't help the cause. But you also have to look at on the field as well. He has not been productive by his standards. And his numbers are strong. He's a Hall of Famer. We get all that stuff. But the past 2 years have not been up to his standards or really an elite wide receiver. He's missed multiple games. I think it was 9 games last year. He played in less than 50% of the snaps that he was available when he was playing. Now he'd produce some yards and he would have some moments, but it wasn't conducive to the salary that you're paying him and the elevated status that you were giving him. So I think that once you get over the initial, wow, Julio Jones is a Tennessee Titan, for a Falcon supporter, you're kind of bummed by that, but you also have to realize it was time for the franchise to move on, especially when he doesn't want to play for the franchise anymore. And that's where it got to that point. So I think that as far as him going to the Titans, if he's healthy and available and can give you, shoot, even 12, 13 games, 13 out of 16 or 17 games now. So if he could give you 13 out of 17 regular season games, that's a victory for the Titans. And I think obviously look on paper, you put him in the lineup with Brown, the other elite wide receiver, a guy that has 2,000 yard receiving campaigns in his first 2 years in the NFL. He's only going to get better. Obviously, Mr. 2,000 yard rushing, Derrick Henry, he's on the roster. That offense, which already was, I think, scored this average of second most points in the NFL last season, only behind the Titans. We think about these elite offenses in Buffalo and Cleveland, and obviously the Kansas City Chiefs, and even Tampa, and with all their weapons, Tennessee was the second highest scoring team in the NFL last year. So you got to think that, yeah, Julio Jones, if he can get on the field, and you have to be worried about that, him being in his early 30s and dealing with leg injuries as a wide receiver, that's not a good sign. But if you're a Titans, you make that move because you have to look at it from, we get a guy that on paper is still, when he's on the field, a top 5 receiver in the NFL. Some would say the best as far as skill set and production when he's on the field. I mean, you can have questions about that. You look at Nuke Hopkins at Arizona. You look at Michael Thomas in New Orleans. There's some other guys that may be in that conversation as far as all best in the league, but he's in the conversation, so that's big. So I think it's a move for both parties, is beneficial and can work for both sides. And as far as the Falcons, yeah, you get a second round pick. You make that trade, you move on. Obviously, you're gonna probably have Calvin Ridley's your top receiver now. You drafted Kyle Pitts, excuse me. You drafted Kyle Pitts from Florida, the tight end wide receiver hybrid. He'll be all over the field. Already have Hurst, your other tight end, who's played at a Pro Bowl level. So you have 2 tight end sets. I guess Gage is your second wide receiver, but they can make some moves along those lines. You got to figure or wonder, when is it going to be the end for Matt Ryan? Because if you're going to trade Julio Jones, Matt Ryan has to be right in that conversation as far as if you can do a complete rebuild and get those big salaries off your books, what's going to happen then? So we'll see what happens. He'll play this year for the Falcons, Matt Ryan. They're not going to trade him at this point. But you have to think about the future and what's that going to entail. And as far as Aaron Rodgers not reporting the mandatory minicamp, yeah, you knew he wasn't going to report these 3-day minicamp. He's going to take the $90,000 fine. And I think in a way this could be beneficial. Well, it's a bad situation, and we've delved into all the details with it. But if you're the Packers and all those receivers, remember those receivers that did not report to the voluntary minicamp from Adams, the other top guys, they all reported to mandatory minicamp. Because while voluntary is one thing, mandatory is mandatory, and they don't have Aaron Rodgers' money to be suffering fines every day. Show solidarity to Rodgers. And look, I'm sure Rodgers is their guy, and obviously you want Rodgers to be on your catch a pass from him. He's winning MVP. He's the best quarterback in the league, best player in the league. So you want him to be on your roster, but for what the benefit can be is that if this stalemate does happen, or not stalemate, but if there's a resolution with Aaron Rodgers playing for another franchise, the good news is you're getting Jordan Love reps. And I know it's mini camp, so I mean, they're not in full pads and going all 100%, but you're getting used to Jordan Love being the number one signal caller, catching passes from him, seeing him make the calls, make the plays, being in the film sessions with them. You're getting used to that potential reality. And this is good for Love. Remember, he did not suit up for one game last year. He was a DNP and by every game last year. So now he's going to be the backup this year. So you assume he's going to dress. But this is a good chance for him to develop and improve his rapport with that in that offense with those receivers and running backs. So I think this is still could be a very good situation for him. But we'll see how that translates as we go through the rest of the mini camp season in the NFL. All right, let's move on to the original free kick and things going on in the world of professional soccer. We'll start with Atlanta United. The Atlanta United 2 was able to earn a 1-0 victory over Louisville City this past Sunday night at Fifth Third Stadium. Aiden McFadden scored the lone goal of the contest, while Alec Khan earned the shutout for Atlanta in the victory. Here is Caleb Wiley on the win for Atlanta.
Well, it was a great performance. I thought we really needed that after our last game. So to be able to bounce back like that is really great from the guys. And we go to training, the next 2 days, and we prepare on Wednesday, and we do it again. And I think if we keep on having this mindset coming out like this, then we're going to be a really good team going forward.
And it was also a big night because it was the first match under new manager Jack Collison. Previous manager Tony Annan has moved on to be the head coach at University of South Carolina. So Collison, who has experience working in the academy, was elevated to the head coaching position, and it was his first victory in his first match. A big moment in the contest, one of them, was in the 27th minute when the lone goal of the contest was scored by McFadden. Caleb Wiley was able to gain possession of the ball about 35 yards outside on the left flank. He was able to cross the ball into the penalty area where McFadden was able to make a diving effort and redirect the ball into the net for the lone goal of the contest. Here is Wiley, the 16-year-old, on the assist.
Yeah, well, when I got the ball, there was not much pressure. So, these days I've been trusting my right foot a lot more. So I put it on the right foot, and I actually saw him going to the back post, and so I put it there, and thankfully he was able to put it in for my first assist, which is amazing feeling. So yeah, it was great.
And it was that goal. McFadden has been on fire the past few matches, multiple braces, and getting a goal here. Here is Collison on McFadden and his offensive production since joining the team a few weeks ago.
Aiden's been fantastic since he's come in, and I think the great thing about Aiden is that work rate and that desire to improve. I mean, we spoke to the boys when we started this week about it being a room with a lot of potential. There's no doubt there's a lot of potential within the group, and now we're getting to that stage where we need to turn that potential into performances, and I think that's 5 goals from this season from right back, which is an incredible return. So I'm sure he's going to keep working, keep wanting to improve and get better, and hopefully he can keep scoring throughout the season because it's been a real bonus so far.
Yeah, and Louisville was able to get some more efforts on goal in the second half. In the 71st minute, Corbin Bone was able to cross the ball into Kyle Gregg, who tried to get the ball towards the net on a back heel flick, but McFadden was able to clear the ball out of the line to preserve the shutout. Here is McFadden on the defensive effort.
I mean, it's a mindset. You don't fold. Yeah, you believe that you're not giving up a goal. Everybody's working for each other. So you win your battles, you cover for the guys, and good things happen. Again, I said it. I'm so proud of these guys. We just worked hard, and everybody was there at the right time. So it's a great team performance. But like Coach said, there's a lot of things we can work on. So it's about hitting our stride, moving forward, and starting to, build a little better, maybe out of the back, create more chances. But to weather a storm like that is incredible, and credit to these guys.
And here is Collison on the team's defense and being able to preserve the shutout.
Yeah, it's something we spoke of a lot this week in terms of just trying to be fearless. Look, they're one of the big boys in the league, been very successful over the past 5 seasons. So we knew it was going to be difficult. And in terms of the starting lineup, very young, very inexperienced. So we knew we had to work harder than them. And obviously at times we knew it was going to be tricky and we rode our luck. But that desire to defend, that willingness to go and press, even right in the 95th, 96th minute was something that's really pleasing. And look, don't get me wrong, I'm sure we're going to have better performances in terms of our in-possession stuff and things like that. But they're a top team, so I don't want to take nothing away from that willingness and that real desire to defend.
Now, another big turning point of the contest was in the 80th minute when Louisville was awarded a penalty kick after a handball was reported by an Atlanta player. McCabe took the penalty shot for the Louisville team, and Khan made a strong save on that penalty kick with his right hand in a diving effort. The McCabe was able to retrieve the rebound and take another shot on net, but Can was able to deny McCabe again. Can finished with 7 saves on 8 shots in the contest for his first shutout of the season for Atlanta United too. Here is Collison on Can's save.
There was a couple of interesting decisions tonight, and we know these things happen, but in moments like that, you need your big players to step up, and his leadership tonight was incredible. His decision-making in terms of slowing the game down when he knew how to play quick. And when you talk about real big moments, I mean, the first save is incredible, but the second save, his desire to get out there and block, I think that really inspired the group to continue putting their bodies on the line. I mean, when you see 7 minutes going up and you got people cramping and we're getting peppered in the box, that's when you need to see real character. And I'm really pleased in my first game, first week, seeing that desire, that passion. And the boys were lions out there tonight, so I'm really proud of them.
And Atlanta is making a very nice run in the USL Championship standings. They currently sit second place in the Central Division. The top 4 teams from each division makes the playoffs. So Atlanta right now, if the season ended, would be in the postseason. Here is Collison on this playoff push.
I mean, that was an emotional night, that was for sure. Within the group, there's an awful lot of belief that we want to push on and we want to be successful. And obviously, with 4 teams qualifying for the playoffs, I mean, we'd be silly to say that we didn't feel that we had enough to try and push for it and to try and get there. At the same time, we know it's an awful long road ahead. We know there's an awful lot of work to do. And for us now, it's about not getting above our stations, because we know we can play a lot better. We know we're going to have to play a lot better at times this season. But I'm sure wins like tonight give the boys a lot of belief. And obviously our focus now is fully focused on SKC Wednesday. We had a fantastic result the other night. So I'm sure it's going to be a real top game, and we'll take it very cliched game by game. But if the boys put that effort in, there's really no telling in terms of how far they can go this year.
Yeah, and Atlanta does return to action tonight at home against Sporting Kansas City 2 on June 9th. So we'll be keeping track of that contest and see everything that's going on. Big win also for the United States men's soccer team, getting the 3-2 victory over Mexico to win the inaugural CONCACAF Nations League final. And I put on Twitter, look, it's not the World Cup. It's not even the Gold Cup, which is later on this summer. But this is a very big win for the United States. Remember, over the past few years has not been a good scenario for the men's national team, especially on the senior side. Didn't qualify for the World Cup, this upcoming one that's going to take place. Didn't qualify, or the previous one that took place. Didn't qualify for the Olympics, which is taking place this year. This has been just a lot of lack of qualifications of major tournaments. So it's been just not a good run. Now they have a new manager and trying to build the team up in that way with the Greg Burkhalter, and trying to not only qualify for the upcoming World Cup, but the next one after that, which will be in the United States, which they'll qualify for automatically as the host nation. But you want to go into that tournament with a lot of momentum. But let's stick to what we saw on June 6th, this previous night. Big comeback for the United States. You saw Reina scored a goal early in the first half to give them, well, first of all, they trailed 1-0. Corona got a goal 2 minutes into the contest, and you were worried, Jesus Corona, and you're worried that they would lose the game pretty handily because Mexico was looking good and looking strong. Reina was able to get a nice strike later on in that first half, Giovanni Reina, to make the score 1-1. So it was 1-1 heading into the second half. Mexico retook the lead on a score by Lynx in the 79th minute to make it 2-1. But McKinney for the United States team, Weston McKinney, was able to get a strike of his own to make the score 2-2. And it was a back and forth affair, went into extra time. Pulisic was able to convert the penalty kick in the 114th minute. Very nice strike past Ochoa. He went high into the right corner, and that shot a lot of times can go high and wide, and he missed the net completely. It was a very confident strike by Pulisic. He was able to make the score 3-2. Oh, and I got to mention also probably the man of the match, Ethan Horvath, who went into the contest in the let's see, when did Ethan enter the contest? I gotta get that correct. In the 69th minute, when Zach Steffen, the main starter, the first team goalkeeper for the United States team, looked like he suffered a knee injury. I've been trying to find out what the word is, but it was non-contact. He went to make a move or went for a save, and his knee buckled or something went wrong, and he was down for the night and put no pressure on his leg. Very concerning situation. But Ethan Horvath was able to he saved a penalty kick in the contest, and just a very big moment for him, and made multiple crucial saves for the United States team to earn that victory, and they won a trophy. It counts, but I think it was a very big moment, and I have to mention this as well. Yeah, it was very bad seeing all of the fans throwing the debris and throwing the water and or the I want to say beer can, but just throwing stuff on the field, hitting players. One of the Mexican players, he got hit in the head with one of those. They stopped the match late in the contest because I guess there were some negative or racist or sexual chants in the stands, so they stopped the match for a few minutes because there's been a big push against end racism and homophobia and things along those lines. So all of that was taking place in the contest, but in the end, which is bad. That's all bad stuff. But I think in the end, the United States winning this. And I'm saying it wasn't. I say it's not the Gold Cup, which later on in the year it wasn't a World Cup, obviously. But for a team that's trying to build with Burkhalter and trying to develop, that was a very big moment for them to win that cup or win that championship. So that's something that we'll be keeping track of with the Gold Cup, obviously, going on later on in the year. I'm trying to think of anything else going on in the world of sports. I've been following the French Open a little bit. Yeah, interesting. Federer, he left the tournament early in the middle of a match, which was kind of surprising. But we're looking forward to seeing the French Open taking place or ending this weekend. Really, baseball is kind of chugging along. We'll see what happens there. I mentioned the NFL, the playoffs are. We're getting a very interesting final in the NHL Stanley Cup in the Eastern Conference Finals, getting Tampa and Montreal. Montreal in the conference finals for the first time, I think, since 2013. So it's been a while for them. So that's very important. We'll see what happens in the West. But Stanley Cup Finals are slowly or the playoffs are slowly rolling along, getting close to the finals. So we keep a track of all that going on as well. That concludes today's show. Thanks for listening to our broadcast. As always, head to thesportsinquirer.net and to get all the stuff we have going on. Also, our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Sports Inquirer. And finally, subscribe to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and more. Until next time, good fight, good night, and be safe.